The atmosphere aboard the alien mothership was tense, filled with the low hum of machinery and the eerie silence that comes before battle. The massive vessel hovered in the cold expanse of space, its dark metallic exterior glistening under the distant stars. Inside, in a large chamber overlooking a battlefield, General Cylon stood with his arms crossed, staring down at the captured humans below. Cylon was the proud leader of an advanced alien species, feared across the galaxy for their ruthlessness and technological superiority. His species had conquered countless worlds, enslaving weaker civilizations and annihilating those who resisted. The humans, he believed, were no different, fragile, primitive, and unworthy of any true respect. But today they had surprised him. Despite the overwhelming might of his forces, a small group of resistance fighters had managed to put up a fight. But now they were captured, their fate sealed. Cylon smirked as he looked down at the prisoners, shackled and lined up like cattle waiting for slaughter. His gaze swept over them, his thoughts filled with mockery. He had seen many prisoners before, each one begging for mercy, their will broken under the weight of his power. But today there was something different. A small figure stood out among the captives. A human soldier, seemingly fragile, almost comical in his thin combat suit. The camera zoomed in on this soldier, a man who appeared weak and helpless, standing apart from the others. His name was Captain James Cross, a soldier from Earth, a world far from the alien empire's reach. James stood tall, his head held high despite the chains that bound him. There was something about him that caught the general's attention. Maybe it was the defiant look in his eyes, or the calmness with which he faced his fate. "Look at this," Cylon chuckled, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Another pathetic human thinking they can stand up to us. What a joke." He raised an eyebrow, amused by the sight before him. "You, human," he sneered, pointing directly at James. "Do you think you stand a chance against the might of the Galactic Empire?" James didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, focused. But deep inside, he was far from helpless. He had been through worse, and he had trained for moments like this. Still, he knew the gravity of the situation. The aliens had the upper hand, and his resistance was futile, at least on the surface. Cylon's laughter filled the room as he continued to taunt James. "I bet you have no idea what's about to happen to you. You humans, you're so predictable. Weak and cowardly, always fighting for a cause you'll never win." He stepped forward, his cold alien eyes locking with James. "But go ahead, entertain me. I want to see what little tricks you think will save you." With a gesture from Cylon, two large alien soldiers moved to drag James toward the general. The chains clinked with every step, but James walked calmly, his shoulders squared, his eyes never leaving the general's. Inside, he was calculating, planning his next move. But outwardly he appeared nothing more than a prisoner, a powerless man destined to meet his end. As James was pushed to the center of the room, Cylon's smirk grew wider. "How pathetic," he said, examining the human closely. "You don't even have the strength to fight back. Your race is truly doomed." The general's mocking tone filled the air, but James remained silent. His mind raced, analyzing every sound, every movement. He knew this moment would come. He knew the aliens underestimated humanity, and he was ready to prove them wrong. Cylon's eyes glinted with amusement. "I suppose you're wondering why I haven't killed you yet," he said, leaning in closer. "Well, that's because I want to see if you have any last words, any pathetic attempt to beg for mercy. It's always the same with you humans. Weak, hopeless, a lost cause." James finally spoke, his voice steady and calm despite the mocking atmosphere around him. "You'll regret underestimating us," he said, his words carrying more weight than they seemed. "Humanity's strength doesn't lie in what you see. It's in what you don't." Cylon paused, his expression faltering for a moment. He was used to seeing his enemies break, to hear them beg for their lives. But James's words struck him with an unfamiliar feeling. Was this human defying him, even in this hopeless situation? The general narrowed his eyes, growing frustrated. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled. "Let's end this quickly. Bring him to me." James was pushed forward, and as he was led to the center of the chamber, the tension in the air grew thick. The alien soldiers watched with anticipation, expecting the human to collapse under the pressure. But James had no intention of doing that. He had one last card to play, one final move that would change everything. As James stood before General Cylon, he felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. Hidden within the layers of his combat suit was a highly advanced technology, something that no one, not even the aliens, could have anticipated. His body, enhanced with cutting-edge nanotechnology, had been designed for moments like this. It was a secret, a weapon of last resort. And now, it was time to use it. The general looked down at James, smirking. "You think you're special, don't you?" he said, chuckling. "You're just a weak human, no different from the others. And yet, here you are, standing before me like you actually matter." But as he spoke, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. There was something different about James's stance. A faint hum filled the air, unnoticed at first, but growing louder by the second. The alien soldiers around him seemed confused, as though they couldn't quite pinpoint the source of the disturbance. Cylon's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading as he realized something was wrong. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and the air felt charged, as if something was about to happen. And then, without warning, James disappeared. The cloaking device built into his suit activated, and in an instant, James vanished from sight. The general and his soldiers were left staring at empty space, their confusion palpable. Cylon's voice cracked with disbelief as he barked orders for the soldiers to find him. But it was already too late. James had already moved. He was faster than they could imagine, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge their attempts to capture him. He moved through the shadows, unseen, but not unnoticed. The alien soldiers began to panic, realizing that they were no longer in control. The suspense in the room grew unbearable. Was this human just a weakling as they had assumed, or was he something much more dangerous? Cylon, once so confident in his superiority, now found himself questioning everything. The general looked around, frustration growing. "Find him," he yelled, but there was no sign of the human soldier. The tension was palpable, the room now filled with nothing but the sound of rushing footsteps and the crackling of unseen energy. What had they missed? What secret did this human hold that they hadn't accounted for? The suspense was overwhelming, and as the soldiers scurried around in confusion, Cylon's smirk began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of dread. This wasn't going to be as easy as he had thought. This human, this weakling, had just become the biggest threat he had ever faced. James stood still as the alien soldiers searched the empty space where he had been just moments before. The quiet of the room was broken only by the rushed footsteps of the panicked soldiers, their voices filled with confusion and anger as they tried to figure out where he had gone. But James wasn't far. His cloaking device had activated, and he had disappeared into the shadows. For a moment, the room was eerily silent. The tension was thick, palpable, as if the very air around them was charged with anticipation. General Cylon, the alien leader who had once mocked James as nothing more than a weak human, stood frozen in disbelief. His soldiers were frantic, searching every corner, but they couldn't find him. They were in a panic, and their confusion only made the situation worse. Cylon's smirk was gone. In its place was a growing frustration that no one in the room dared to speak about. James, however, was calm. His heart beat steadily in his chest as he moved through the shadows, barely making a sound. He knew exactly what he had to do. The general and his soldiers had underestimated him, and now it was time to show them exactly what humanity was capable of. After a few long moments of tension-filled silence, James stepped out of the shadows, slowly and deliberately. He didn't need to rush. He knew that his time was coming. As he moved forward, his hand reached up to remove his helmet, revealing his face for the first time. The moment the helmet came off, Cylon's eyes narrowed, and the alien soldiers froze in place. James stood before them, a human, a race they had considered weak and primitive. His brown eyes met Cylon's, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. There was a heavy silence as Cylon studied James, his mind racing to understand what was happening. How was this human so calm? What had he been hiding all this time? Cylon's reaction came quickly. He let out a mocking laugh. "So this is the mighty human," he said, his voice filled with amusement. "You're nothing more than a pathetic creature. Look at you, so small and fragile. You're nothing compared to the great powers of the galaxy." The alien soldiers around Cylon began to laugh as well, their voices harsh and cruel. They had been raised to believe in their superiority, and the sight of this human, standing before them with nothing more than his bare hands, only solidified their belief that humans were weak. But James didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, unwavering. He knew that this was just the beginning. The general's words didn't bother him. They were just the sound of arrogance, a distraction. James had something much more powerful hidden beneath the surface. While Cylon continued to mock him, James's mind raced. He had been trained for situations like this. His body, though human in appearance, had been enhanced with state-of-the-art nanotechnology. Underneath his uniform, beneath the flesh, was a network of microscopic machines that amplified his strength, speed, and agility. He was no ordinary soldier. No, James was part of a secret project, one that had transformed humans into something far more dangerous than the alien invaders could ever imagine. Cylon's mocking tone continued, but James could see it. He could see the first hints of doubt beginning to form in the alien leader's eyes. The general's arrogance was starting to waver. There was something off about this human, something he hadn't anticipated. James slowly raised his hand, revealing a small device hidden in the palm of his glove. The soldiers around him took a step back, unsure of what was coming next. Even Cylon's eyes widened in momentary confusion. What was this human doing? Before Cylon could react, James pressed the button on the device, and in an instant, the familiar hum of energy filled the air. The cloaking device hidden beneath his uniform powered up again, and James vanished from sight. The soldiers froze, their eyes darting around the room, trying to track his movements. But it was too late. James was gone, hidden from view. His cloaking device had rendered him completely invisible to the aliens' advanced detection systems. The soldiers scrambled, their panic rising as they realized they were once again in the dark, unsure of where their enemy was. Cylon's face twisted in frustration. He barked orders to his men, commanding them to find James, but the soldiers were visibly shaken. They had never faced anything like this before. A human, invisible, faster, and stronger than they had ever imagined. The general's confidence was slipping. His earlier smugness had evaporated, replaced by uncertainty. James moved through the shadows, silent and unseen. His movements were deliberate, calculated. He knew exactly where to strike, and he knew that time was on his side. Every step he took was part of a plan, part of a strategy to prove that humanity was not the weak, inferior race the aliens had always believed them to be. The ship's interior was a maze of corridors, a labyrinth of metal and alien technology. But James wasn't intimidated. He moved like a shadow, using the advanced cloaking device to stay hidden while preparing for his next move. He could hear the aliens' frantic voices, the sound of their boots echoing against the metal floors as they searched for him. But he remained calm. He had faced worse odds before. Cylon and his soldiers were starting to panic. The ship's sensors were useless. They couldn't track James. Their once confident leader had no answers, and the soldiers could feel the tide beginning to turn. What was once an easy victory had become a nightmare. Suddenly, James appeared again, stepping out of the shadows right in front of General Tylan. The general's eyes widened in shock, unable to react fast enough. James didn't waste time. He reached out and grabbed the general by the throat, his enhanced strength allowing him to lift Tylan off the ground with ease. The alien leader struggled, his face turning purple as James's grip tightened. The soldiers around them hesitated, unsure of what to do. They had never seen anything like this before. Tylan gasped for air, his eyes filled with fear for the first time in his life. This human, this soldier, was not what they had expected. "You were wrong," James said, his voice cold and steady. "You thought we were weak. You thought you could crush us. But you've made a fatal mistake." With one swift motion, James threw Tylan to the ground, the general crashing hard against the floor. The alien soldiers, stunned by the display of strength, backed away, fear creeping into their minds. They had been trained to fight and win, but this human, this one man, had just shown them that they were outmatched. Tylan struggled to his feet, his breathing heavy, his face contorted with rage. What are you?" he gasped, his voice shaking. James didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood tall, his gaze cold and unyielding. "I'm human," he said simply. "And we're not as weak as you think." James stood silently, concealed within the shadows of the alien mothership. The dim lights cast long, distorted shadows across the walls, as he silently observed the alien soldiers running in every direction, their confusion palpable. They had no idea where he was, nor how to find him. The cloaking device was still active, rendering him invisible to the naked eye. But James wasn't just relying on the device. No, he was going to make sure that the aliens truly felt the full force of humanity's power. His mind raced, but his body was calm. He knew exactly what to do next. The alien ship's AI system, advanced beyond anything humans had seen, was now his target. James activated a hidden control panel on his wrist, hacking into the ship's security network. His nanotech-enhanced body was fast, and the AI's complex systems, while impressive, were no match for his human intellect. Within moments, James had disabled the ship's security cameras, leaving the aliens blind. He was in control now. With the AI's surveillance down, James knew it was time to take the fight to them. Using his enhanced agility, he moved quickly, silently, like a shadow gliding through the ship's narrow corridors. The alien guards still searched for him, their confusion and panic growing. But James was always one step ahead. His enhanced senses allowed him to track their movements, anticipating where they would go next. He wasn't just hiding. He was stalking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. James moved like a blur, a quick flash of motion in the dimly lit corridors. He reached the first group of alien soldiers who were patrolling a narrow hallway, unaware of the impending danger. In one fluid motion, James dropped from the ceiling above them, his body moving like a well-trained predator. He didn't give them a chance to react. With precise and calculated strikes, James took down 3 soldiers in mere seconds. His enhanced strength made the task seem effortless. The soldiers crumpled to the floor, their bodies twitching as they hit the cold metal ground. But James was already moving again, faster than they could comprehend. The chaos had begun. The remaining soldiers, hearing the commotion, turned to see their comrades incapacitated. But before they could even process what had happened, James was already on them. His movements were a blur, the speed of his enhanced body making him a terrifying force. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a force of nature. In mere moments, 2 more soldiers were down, their bodies sprawled out in the hallway as James continued to take them down one by one. As he dispatched the soldiers with deadly efficiency, James moved further into the heart of the alien mothership, his mind focused on his mission. The aliens were now in full panic mode. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had mocked humanity, laughed at its so-called weakness, and now they were seeing firsthand what happens when you underestimate a human soldier. James wasn't alone in this fight, though. He had more than just his fists and speed to rely on. Hidden beneath his uniform, James had advanced weaponry that made him even more dangerous. As the remaining alien soldiers regrouped, thinking they could outmaneuver him, James activated his energy blades. The blades hummed to life, glowing with a deadly blue light that illuminated the dim hallways. With a flick of his wrist, James swung one of the blades, cutting through the air with ease. The energy blade sliced through the first soldier's armor, cutting through the thick metal like it was paper. The soldier didn't even have time to scream before he was down, his body falling in a heap at James's feet. The other soldiers hesitated, but James wasted no time. He moved with fluid precision, each strike calculated, each movement bringing him closer to his goal. But that wasn't all. James wasn't just about brute force. He had something else up his sleeve, something the aliens hadn't anticipated. He reached into his belt and pulled out an EMP grenade. In an instant, the grenade was activated, and with a quick toss, James sent it rolling toward the group of alien soldiers. The grenade exploded with a sharp electrical pulse, sending a wave of energy through the hallway. The lights flickered as the ship's electronics were momentarily disabled. Alien weapons malfunctioned, and their advanced shields went down. It was a moment of chaos. The aliens, once confident in their technological superiority, were now facing a weapon they couldn't defend against. Their blasters misfired, and their shields flickered out of existence. James's EMP grenade had rendered their most powerful tools useless. In that instant, the alien soldiers were vulnerable. Their advanced technology, once their greatest strength, now worked against them. They were caught in the chaos, unable to react, as James used the opportunity to strike with even more precision. His energy blades flashed through the air, cutting down one soldier after another. The aliens tried to retreat, but they were no match for his speed. James moved like a whirlwind, his every action calculated and deadly. The scene was like something out of an action movie. The tight corridors of the alien ship became a battleground, with flashing lights, sparks flying from malfunctioning technology, and laser beams crisscrossing through the air. Every step James took was filled with intensity, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge incoming fire and strike back with deadly force. His energy blades danced through the air, cutting through the alien soldiers like a hot knife through butter. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. The aliens had never experienced a force like this before. They had underestimated humanity, believing them to be weak, to be inferior. But now, they were facing a human soldier who was not just physically enhanced, but had the cunning and intelligence to outsmart them at every turn. The aliens were scattered, disoriented, and terrified, unable to mount any sort of organized resistance. James didn't give them the chance to regroup. He moved with purpose, his every strike bringing him closer to his goal. The battle was far from over, but with each soldier he took down, James sent a clear message to the alien invaders. Humanity wasn't going to back down. They weren't weak. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would fight until the very end. As the final alien soldier fell, James stood in the middle of the corridor, breathing heavily, but his eyes were focused and unyielding. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. He knew that Cylon, the alien general, was still out there, and he wasn't about to let the general escape unscathed. James's mission wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity was no longer to be underestimated. The hallway was littered with the bodies of the alien soldiers, their once pristine armor now broken and charred. The sound of James's breathing echoed in the stillness, and for a moment there was only silence. But it was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. The aliens had learned their lesson. Humanity was not to be trifled with. And this was only the beginning. The metallic doors of the alien mothership slammed shut with an ominous clang. The voice of General Cylon echoed throughout the ship's speakers, reverberating off the cold walls of the lower levels. Lockdown initiated. The human is ours. James could feel the weight of the air around him as the automated systems sealed the corridors, trapping him inside the labyrinthine hallways of the ship. The once familiar hum of the ship's engines became deafening, and James felt a twinge of panic that he quickly pushed aside. Panic wouldn't help him now. It never had. As the ship's automatic lockdown went into full effect, James found himself alone in a dark, narrow corridor. The walls were cold, and the air smelled metallic. He took a deep breath, focusing. There was no room for mistakes now. He had to keep moving. The lights flickered, and his wrist pad blinked with data. The ship was huge, more like a floating fortress than a mothership, and navigating its winding corridors wasn't going to be easy. But James had trained for this. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a warrior, sharp, agile, and relentless. And despite being trapped inside the alien ship, he wouldn't let it be his tomb. He would fight his way out. As James cautiously crept through the dimly lit hallways, his thoughts drifted to Earth. He remembered the days before the war, when humanity had been just another species on the brink of technological advancement. How quickly that had changed. A soft hum echoed through the corridors, and James knew it was the ship's AI system running a scan. It was just a matter of time before they track his movements. He needed to move faster. Flashbacks began to play in James's mind. He saw his comrades back on Earth, fighting for survival against a powerful enemy. Their faces, friends, family, loved ones, flashed before him. Each of them had given their lives for a future they would never see. James could still hear their voices, echoing in his mind. "We've got to protect Earth, James. We're the last line of defense. Make it count, Captain. For our families, for the ones we lost." He clenched his fist tightly. Earth, his planet. He couldn't let it fall to these invaders. Not after all the lives lost. Every life, every sacrifice, was a reminder of why he had to keep going. As James moved deeper into the ship, the labyrinth seemed endless. But he had no choice. He would face the alien menace head-on, just as humanity had fought back every time they were underestimated. They were survivors. They were fighters. And this time, they would win. Suddenly, a soft click of boots against metal echoed in the hallway ahead. James froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the hidden weapon at his side. His enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of someone breathing. Someone close. "Who's there?" James whispered to himself, gripping his weapon. The sound grew louder as the figure drew closer. Then, as the shadow turned the corner, James's heart stopped. He recognized the soldier, his fellow comrade, Lieutenant Miller. But something about the way Miller was moving sent a cold shiver down James's spine. There was something off about him. "Miller," James's voice rang out, breaking the silence. "What are you doing here?" Miller froze, his face turning pale as he slowly turned to face James. But there was no camaraderie in his eyes, just cold, calculated betrayal. And before James could process what was happening, Miller raised his weapon, pointing it directly at him. "Miller, what the hell are you doing?" James shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. A bitter laugh escaped Miller's lips, and he lowered his weapon slightly. "You never saw it coming, did you, James? You were too busy fighting for a lost cause." James's mind raced. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Miller, his trusted comrade, someone he had fought alongside for years, was working for the aliens. The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. The betrayal was as sharp as a blade. "You've been working for them, all along?" James asked, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Miller's smile widened. "It's nothing personal, James. You were always just a pawn in a bigger game. And now, you're about to lose." James's heart pounded in his chest, but he wasn't about to let this traitor have the upper hand. In an instant, his mind flashed back to the countless hours of training and preparation. He was ready for this. Miller might have been a turncoat, but James wasn't going down without a fight. In a blur of motion, James dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast from Miller's weapon. The shot ricocheted off the walls, sending sparks flying in all directions. James's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he rolled and regained his footing. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a force to be reckoned with. "Miller, you've made a mistake," James growled, his eyes burning with fury. "You're going to regret this." Miller chuckled darkly. "Oh, I don't think so, James. You're trapped. There's no way out." Before James could react, the traitor hit a nearby control panel, activating the ship's lockdown protocol once again. The metal doors in the hallway slammed shut, and the sound of grinding metal echoed throughout the corridor. The trap was complete. "Why?" James spat, his anger rising. "Why betray us? Why betray humanity?" Miller took a step closer, his eyes filled with disdain. "Because the aliens offered me something you could never give me, James. Power. Control. I was tired of being a pawn in someone else's game. I wanted to be on the winning side." James's fists clenched. "The aliens will never win. We will fight until the end. You can't hide behind their lies forever." Miller's face hardened, and he raised his weapon once again. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, James, but you're going to die here. Alone. Just like your precious Earth." James's mind raced, but his body stayed calm. He had no choice but to fight. His enhanced speed and agility gave him an edge, and his nanotech enhancements allowed him to think and react faster than Miller could ever hope to. Before Miller could pull the trigger, James lunged forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat. With a swift motion, he disarmed Miller, knocking the weapon out of his hand. The traitor staggered backward, but James was already on top of him. The fight was brief. Miller was no match for the enhanced human warrior standing before him. As James stood over Miller's defeated form, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the betrayal. But he wasn't going to let it break him. He had a mission, and nothing, not even a traitor in his ranks, was going to stop him. With one last glance at the traitor on the floor, James turned and continued his journey through the ship's dark corridors. The battle wasn't over yet. Dylan was still out there, and James would make sure that the aliens knew exactly what humanity was capable of. The ship's dim lights flickered, and the distant hum of the engines seemed louder now, almost as if it was calling him to finish what he had started. James's resolve was unwavering. He wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. He was fighting for every soldier who had fallen, for every innocent life that had been lost in the war. And no amount of betrayal would stop him from taking down the alien invaders once and for all. James's boots echoed through the metallic hallways of the alien mothership. His mission was simple: eliminate General Dylan and end the alien threat. He had already fought through traitors, broken through security, and taken down countless alien soldiers, but this final challenge would be unlike anything he had faced before. As he approached the command room, his pulse quickened. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the dark, expansive room. It was bathed in the eerie glow of monitors and holographic displays. In the center, standing tall and imposing, was General Xylan. Xylan's appearance was a stark contrast to James. He was tall, armored in a sleek, black battle suit that glinted menacingly in the dim light. At his side, a massive robotic mech suit stood ready. Its mechanical limbs whirred with power as if it were alive. James could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had made it this far, but to defeat Xylan now would take everything he had, and more. "You think you can defeat me, human?" Xylan's voice was deep and cold, filled with arrogance. His gaze swept over James like he was no more than a nuisance. "You're nothing but a primitive being playing at war. My mech suit will crush you." James didn't respond. He simply surveyed the room, taking in every detail. The layout of the command room, the placement of the mech suit, the positioning of Dylan. It all had to be perfect. This would be a battle of wits, not just strength. James had been in tight spots before, and each time he had survived by outsmarting his opponents. This time would be no different. Without a word, Cylon activated the mech suit, and it came to life with a deafening roar. The machine's mechanical arms swung with terrifying speed, ready to strike. The room seemed to tremble as the massive machine stepped forward, its giant steps shaking the ground beneath it. James's eyes narrowed. He had trained for moments like this. Cylon's voice boomed through the command room as the mech suit powered up. "You're already dead. There's no way you can win." James's heart raced, but his mind remained calm. He quickly scanned the room, his nanotech-enhanced vision pinpointing weaknesses in the mech suit's design. The cockpit, the power core, it was all vulnerable if he could get close enough. The mech suit charged, its massive fists swinging at James with incredible force. James's reflexes kicked in, and with a burst of speed, he dodged the blow, narrowly avoiding being crushed under the weight of the suit. His movements were like a blur, enhanced by the nanotech within him, allowing him to move faster than the mech could react. Cylon's eyes widened in surprise as James danced around the suit's attacks, his agility outmatching the machine's brute force. "What are you?" Cylon growled, clearly not expecting such a challenge. James didn't answer. He was too focused on the task at hand. As the mech suit swung again, James rolled beneath its massive legs and sprang up onto the control panel near the cockpit. The mech's sensors went wild, trying to lock onto him, but it was too late. James's nanotech-enhanced reflexes allowed him to hack into the suit's core system. His fingers flew over the panel, quickly accessing the machine's security protocols. Cylon's voice grew more frantic as he saw what James was doing. "No, you can't do this," he shouted, trying to regain control of the suit. But James was already one step ahead. With a single command, James initiated an overload sequence in the mech suit's core. Sparks flew as the machine's systems began to malfunction. Cylon's face contorted in fear as his once invincible suit began to turn against him. "What have you done?" he screamed, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The machine was spiraling out of his control. James leaped off the control panel, narrowly avoiding the mech suit's collapsing frame as it staggered forward. The suit's movements became erratic, its once powerful blows now slower and less precise. The lights in the room flickered as the overload continued, sending a wave of electrical pulses through the suit. Cylon struggled, his voice now tinged with panic. "I will destroy you, human," he bellowed, but his words held no power. The mech suit was no longer an extension of his strength. It was a ticking time bomb, and he was trapped inside it. James knew this was his moment. With his remaining energy, he rushed forward, moving with the precision and speed of a predator. He dodged another erratic swing of the mech's fist, and with a burst of strength, slammed his enhanced hand into the suit's control panel. The overload reached its peak, and the mech suit exploded in a burst of sparks and fire, sending a shockwave through the room. Cylon was thrown backward, his once powerful suit now nothing more than a smoking pile of wreckage. He staggered to his feet, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're impossible," he growled, his voice shaking with anger and fear. But James didn't stop. He wasn't about to give the general the chance to recover. With a final surge of energy, James activated his own weapons, energy blades, glowing with deadly light. The two locked eyes for a brief moment, the tension thick in the air. Then, with a powerful strike, James charged at the weakened Cylon. The battle was over before Cylon had a chance to react. In one swift motion, James drove the energy blade into the general's chest, ending the threat once and for all. Cylon's eyes went wide, his body crumpling to the ground as the life drained from him. James stood over the fallen general, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The room was silent except for the distant hum of the ship's engines. James had done it. He had defeated the alien menace. As the silence stretched on, James looked out the command room's windows. Outside, the sky was ablaze with flashes of light. The battle wasn't over, far from it. But this victory, this moment, was a reminder of what humanity was capable of. Against all odds, they had triumphed. With Cylon dead, the alien forces would be thrown into disarray. James knew there would be more battles to fight, more enemies to face, but for now, the human spirit had prevailed. Against all odds, they had won. The ship's monitors flickered, showing orbital bombardment lights flashing across the stars. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain: humanity would never be underestimated again. With General Cylon's defeat, the atmosphere aboard the alien mothership was thick with tension. James stood, breathing heavily, as the smoldering remains of the once mighty general lay before him. The last vestiges of the alien threat on this ship were now gone, but James knew the war was far from over. Victory over Cylon was merely a small piece in the grand puzzle, one piece that he had taken with all the grit and tenacity humanity could muster. As the ship's engines hummed in the background, James moved to the communication panel, his fingers trembling slightly. His mind raced through the mission, the pain of loss, and the unknown that still awaited him. But there was no time for rest. This was his chance to contact Earth and send a signal that would mark the beginning of humanity's retaliation. He needed to ensure that the alien forces knew Earth was not to be underestimated. His hand hovered over the controls, the urgency of the moment settling into his bones. With a deep breath, he activated the distress signal. The transmission would be broadcasted to every human fleet in range, a call to arms for his fellow soldiers back on Earth. The message was simple but powerful. This is Captain James Cross, speaking from the heart of the enemy mothership. Cylon is dead, and Earth's retaliation begins now. I repeat, the war is not over. The fight continues. Stand strong. As the signal was transmitted, James felt the weight of his words. He had seen firsthand the brutality of the alien forces, their belief that humanity was weak. But Cylon's defeat had proven them wrong. Now, it was time for the human fleet to show the galaxy that Earth's strength was not something to be dismissed. Back on Earth, the response was immediate. The human fleet, a formidable force of warships, began its march into space. Thousands of ships, each bristling with advanced technology, appeared from Earth's atmosphere, their engines roaring to life as they accelerated toward the alien mothership. The ships were built for combat, designed with the lessons learned from the devastating battles humanity had endured over the years. They were equipped with cutting-edge weapons, AI systems, and advanced defense mechanisms, an unstoppable force now headed toward the alien invaders. The aliens, still reeling from the unexpected defeat of General Cylon, were completely unprepared for the overwhelming might of humanity's fleet. The mothership's once proud defenses were now insufficient against the sheer power of Earth's warships. Alien commanders scrambled to reorganize their forces, but it was already too late. The human fleet had arrived. The battle was fierce, with laser beams cutting through the void of space, explosions lighting up the dark expanse of the galaxy. But despite the aliens' technological superiority, they were no match for the might of the human forces. Earth's warships moved with precision, overwhelming the alien defenses with brutal efficiency. The shock and disbelief on the faces of the alien commanders were evident as they tried to rally their forces, but they were quickly outgunned and outmaneuvered. James watched the battle unfold from the command center aboard the alien ship. He could feel the tides of war shifting, the weight of humanity's retaliation finally coming to fruition. The once dominant alien forces were retreating, their ships scattering as Earth's fleet pressed forward. James's heart swelled with pride as the enemy began to break apart, their once impregnable forces now crumbling before the human assault. The visual outside the command center was nothing short of awe-inspiring. Earth's warships emerged from the planet's atmosphere in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. The sheer scale of the fleet was staggering, each ship a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and determination. With every passing moment, the alien mothership shook, each new explosion marking the downfall of the once feared invaders. As the battle raged on in the distance, James found himself lost in thought. The chaotic battle was a far cry from the quiet moments he had once imagined before the war. He thought of Earth, of the people he was fighting for, and of the comrades he had lost. There had been so much pain, so much sacrifice along the way. He had seen friends fall, entire cities burn, and the faces of innocent lives lost in the wake of this galactic war. But now, with Xylan's death and the enemy retreating, it felt like the first real victory humanity had achieved. Yet, even in the face of triumph, there was a sadness in James's heart. The war wasn't over. Far from it. There would be more battles to fight, more lives to sacrifice. The galaxy was vast, and the alien threat wasn't going to disappear overnight. But this victory, this small piece of the puzzle, was a symbol that humanity had the strength to rise up and fight back. As he looked out the window, watching Earth's warships engage the alien fleet, James's mind wandered back to Xylan's words. The general had thought humanity was weak, had laughed at them, mocked their primitive ways. He had underestimated them, underestimated their hearts, their will to survive. And now, as the alien ships scattered and retreated, James couldn't help but smile. They thought we were weak, but they underestimated the heart of humanity. He muttered to himself, the words carrying a bittersweet weight. The final scene outside the mothership's windows was breathtaking. As Earth's warships took control of the battlefield, the sky above them seemed to shift. The once dominant alien forces were now fleeing, their ships retreating into the depths of space, leaving the human fleet victorious. The tides of war had changed, and it was clear that humanity had emerged as a force to be reckoned with. In the command center, James stood tall, his expression resolute. His mission had been completed, but his journey wasn't over. The war was far from finished, but with Xylan's death and humanity's victory, it was clear that Earth's place in the galaxy would never again be the same. The triumphant soundtrack that played in the background seemed to reflect the feelings inside James. There was a sense of accomplishment, yes, but also a reminder of the long road ahead. The battle for Earth had just begun, but now, humanity had the power to push back. The heart of humanity had been proven in the most unlikely of places, a dark alien mothership. And with that victory, Earth's destiny in the stars had been irrevocably altered. As James watched the enemy retreat, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Humanity had faced impossible odds, but they had emerged stronger than ever before. The aliens had thought they were weak. They had been wrong. And now, the galaxy would have to reckon with the true power of humanity. The end of one chapter was merely the beginning of the next. The war was not over, but with Earth's heart and strength now fully revealed, humanity would never be underestimated again.